Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mindsets podcast. I am your host, Angus Cook, and we are now on episode 47. Today I'm joined by another incredible guest, and this one I'm really excited for because we actually seem to think about things very similarly, and so I'm excited to delve into rambling conversations about that. But before I hand over to Robin to introduce himself, I just want to say welcome to anyone that's new, and welcome back to anyone that's old. I massively appreciate the support we've had so far. The podcast has grown hugely in the last couple of months, and that comes down to you guys. So again, big thank you, but then I will hand straight over to Robin to introduce himself. So here you go.
Thanks so much, mate. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to some meandering conversations here. That's where I find my best stuff. But yeah, my name's Robin. I'm head of mental fitness at an on-demand sports psychology app called Get Ahead. We're the official mental training partner for Harrods UK. My background, I'm a fitness psychologist, fitness fanatic, and yeah, I guess you'll find out a bit more about me throughout this podcast.
Exactly. And the reason that he's kept that brief is because we don't do things normally on this podcast. We like to change it up. We like to keep you guys engaged. So the first thing that we do is we do the show and tell section, which was one of my favorite things when I was at school. Once a week, we used to bring something in that was random from home and you tell the class about it. And that's effectively what we're going to do here. Now, the key thing that's interesting is as Robin gets his show and tell, I have no idea what this is. And I appreciate for some of you listening through the podcast platforms, you won't be able to see. And that is where we're going to describe. But if you are listening to this and you're thinking, why would they do this section? It is also on YouTube. So if you want to go and check it out, Mindsets Podcast on YouTube, it's all there. Robin, what is the show and tell that you've got for us?
All right, I go to back the truck up, shall I?
You got to...
No, I got it in my bag. Okay, ready?
Okay. So he brought the entire rucksack.
I'm going to preface it first of all. Okay, because if I get it out, it's going to just look like what it is, right?
Okay.
But there's a bit more to it. So I was thinking about a lot of things and wondering what should I actually grab for this? Like things are dotted around like my house. I'm like, as an athlete, I've got medals in lots of different sports. And I thought, bring the medal, what would that look like? Just am I showing off, right? But I thought there's a bit more meaning behind this. So let me grab it and I'll show you.
We've had a few medals, to be fair, but like this is the biggest medal that I've seen.
All right, the biggest medal, but also this is a participation medal.
Is it?
Yes.
As far as, how big was the winner's medal? Because like, what the hell? So basically, for those, like I said, I'll do an audio description. I'm currently looking at a medal that is probably the width of a large hand, or the length of a large hand in width. And it says PCA, physical culture on it. It's black, but with silver. It's huge. But what's the story behind this medal?
So, all right. So this is, PCA is a bodybuilding federation in the UK. And I competed there a year ago, 2 years ago actually now. And this, as I say, is a participation medal. I've got lots of medals, lots of like newspaper clippings from when I was a young kid, screenshots of like rankings in the UK. And this stood out for me when I thought about bringing something. And the reason being is that, so when I first got into bodybuilding, I competed in the first show and I had no expectation. I was like, I'm just going to do this for a bit of fun. I was told I looked good. So I was like, let's go see what I can do. A bit like a beauty pageant. Loved it. It was so fun. Honestly, so enjoyable. I qualified for nationals. Didn't really know that was going to happen. But 6 months later, I was prepping for that show. And I was like, I can take it a bit more serious now. I was working like 9 to 6. I was, I had failed one of my exams at uni, so I was like resitting that. So I was revising on the training, revising at lunchtime, revising on the way home. I'd then get changed in my trainers, run 2 miles away back from home. Then I would cook, do all my meal prep, go to the gym for 2 hours, rinse and repeat every single day. Naturally, as you can probably tell, that's a recipe for burnout. So I did. I burnt out. And as we'll probably go into detail, I've got an autoimmune disease, which kicked my ass. And I actually slipped into like my first sort of, I guess, and probably one of my only sort of depressive states. I've never really been in that point before in my life. Is a real low. I put on a lot of weight. I reverse dieted from being shredded to, completely overweight for me. I was incredibly unhappy. I wasn't training. I couldn't do anything. And I had a lot of unfinished business. So I sort of took the next year off, and it was sort of COVID as well. So forced retirement, I guess. And I came back the year later, and let's say 2 years now ago, I decided to prep again. I was like, all right, I need to prove to myself I can do this. I can get to that stage. I can compete, because I competed for fun before. So I want to compete and actually try and push to win the show, because I came second in the first show. So I competed, great prep, went really well. I did 2 shows in 1 weekend. On the Saturday, I did a UKUP show, which is another federation. I won that show. I got my pro card in that federation. I was thinking about bringing that today, but the next day I did a PCA show and I placed 4th. So I got a participation medal, which obviously is quite big here. But the reason why I brought that and I didn't bring the PCA, the pro card for me, was because that whole journey, the reason why I decided to compete was to impress others, prove that I could do it. And in a subjective sport, you get caught up with like judgment of how people perceive you. And when I think about like what was the best takeaway from that, a participation medal is probably the best thing I could have got, because rather than being caught up in the whole idea of, oh, I need to win, I need to win, I need to be the best in something that I can't really control, I actually found that right, I need to check myself. I'm actually happy with what I did achieve. Like, and so I wrote on the back here, I went home after and I got one of those printable label things. And I put 4th place on the back here. I put the date. I just put, I looked awesome. And that was for me, that was just a reminder. Now I look at it as like, I don't need anyone else's validation about what I've done. I put in so much hard work. 2 years ago, I would have just killed to be on stage. The fact that I got here and then also managed to compete and do really well, for me, it's a reminder that I need my own validation when I come into sport, and that takes the pressure off of me when I compete in, you know?
That is so cool. And obviously the first time when you pulled that out, I didn't know that that was on the back.
Yeah.
So like, I looked awesome is like a journal diary entry stamp sort of thing. That's wicked. And like, I think that probably does come from your personal journey, especially with, as you said, you have an autoimmune disease and you've kind of gone through that. And so you're taking kind of appreciation as you go these days, which is something that I feel like a lot of athletes, and certainly myself, has been guilty of not doing at certain points throughout their life for various different things. So I love that. And I might buy a label printer after this and start labeling stuff.
Or take it down and get like engraved at a local
exactly.
trophy shop or whatnot, you know?
Awesome. So let's go back to before, I guess you knew you had an immune disease, or maybe you didn't even have it at that point in time. So when you were younger, you were quite sporty. I think a lot of people are, it starts off, and this is a standard thing, I think, in a lot of education across the world. Sport is part of education. So you start off, but then extracurricular activities, for me, and I assume for you, was pretty much any sport you can get your hands on, you'll do.
Yeah. Literally. Like, I think I was very fortunate now, hold my hands up, my parents could put me through those things. And they also not forced me to, but gave me the opportunity to. I remember flyers would come through to join a club and they'd be like, oh, do you want to do that? I was like, yeah. And they had the facilities to be able to do it, which is quite nice, you know, very privileged in that regard. But I always said yes to everything. Like, I was, the way that my parents say, like, I was like running and walking before anyone, like in school and whatnot. And I was pretty good at everything as well, which I know, like, I blessed.
There was always that one person at school that just happens to be good at.
I was that guy people hated. It's like, oh, he's bloody good at all of this. Like, pick everything up. One thing I wasn't good at was football. That was the one thing.
So I was going to say, the standard thing when you're young in the UK is everyone wants to be a professional football player.
Not for me. Didn't want to do it. I honestly, so I played rugby. I did karate. I was the youngest black belt in my dojo's history at 10 years old. I started when I was 5. I did horse riding. I did golf. I did running. Like, yeah, anything and everything. And in all of those, I was like county level in most of them. So, yeah.
So this is a discussion I actually had with Ollie Russell, who was the last guest of the last episode. He was a bit of a jack of all trades as well. But when you get to a certain age, you kind of have to specialize, because you not only do you not have enough time anymore, but you kind of need to choose which is your favorite.
Yeah, I had that conversation with my parents. I remember it vividly. It was when I was back going to secondary school, and I just thought about starting up swimming. I'd done like council lessons where you go through hat colours and whatnot. My brother was a competitive swimmer, and for me, I was like, he's the one in the water, I'm the one on the land. But when I decided to go to swimming, my parents all sat down and was like, all right, you need to decide what you want to do. Like, I was 4 foot nothing. I was tiny. I was always the smallest person. I was skinny. I was underweight. I was, under like the doctors because I just couldn't keep any food in me. So my parents were like, Rugby, you may need to stop doing that because it's beginning to get into contact now. I'd played tag rugby, but it was starting to get into contact, and it's like that's going to damage like the rest of everything else. So I think my parents they weren't like forcing me to stop anything, but quite good to think, all right, you need to slow down, like choose what you want to do. But I say slow down, you can go hard into that thing. So yeah, I'm very grateful that they guided me in that regard, because then swimming became that thing. Once I did everything else for a bit of fun, like basketball and whatnot, it was then swimming was the thing. I was like, okay, I'm really good at this.
Interestingly, within swimming as well, unlike a sport like rugby where you choose a position, but you play the entire game of rugby and there's lots of elements, and sometimes you have to cover for other positions. You have to have a diverse skill set.
Yeah.
In swimming, pretty quickly you have a certain number or a select few distances or styles of swimming that you do. What was it for you, or did you try and do as many as you could for as long as possible?
So when you're young, when you start swimming, you're doing everything and anything, because like you can't decide yet. You need to be able to do everything. And swimming is very different to many other sports in terms of like, and I will go as far as to say, because I've trained in lots of sports at a high level, it is the hardest sport to training. Really is. Honestly, you don't do the volume in any other sport. The amount of like hours you spend in the pool, like you stink chlorine all the time, right? I remember I was training morning and night, getting up at 4:30, like training 5 till 7, then in the evening get back from school, train 7 till 9, and then night off at 5 till 7, like rinse and repeat. So you'd be doing like 18 hours a week in a pool, which is just like at that point that you're gonna develop gills, aren't you, right? You know. Going on Darwin, like you do the theory of evolution, you'd expect that would be the next sort of step. But so you do a hell of a lot of training. And for me, I realized because of your biomechanics, you realize what you're good at. So for me, breaststroke was the stroke that naturally my body moved that way. And I guess we'll talk about my disability. One of them is hypermobility, so EDS. I was very flexible, which helped with like the leg kick and whatnot. So yeah, that's sort of where I went. And I realized I was in an endurance-based sport before. I was doing cross-country and whatnot, but I really enjoyed sprinting. Sprinting was what I really became good at. So 50 to 100-meter breaststroke, sometimes 200. That was sort of, I guess, what I'd done, yeah.
And again, we're not just saying that you were good, you were county level. You were very good at that, weren't you? What was your sort of ranking?
So at 13 years old, I was the fastest 50-meter breaststroker in the country. Like, so, yeah, I was pretty mad.
Yeah.
I remember so my brother he's 2 years older than me. He's 6'3". I'm 5'9". You probably can't tell I'm sitting down right now. You're very tall as well. I am, vertically challenged, but say when I was younger, I was even shorter. I didn't get my growth spurt until quite late. And I'd be going up. So in swimming, when you go to galas, they do it in heats. And so fastest heats always last. And I'd be rocking around in these final heats, waiting in, like, they call it the whipping area, which sounds a bit weird now, but the marshalling area, waiting to get ready for your race. And there'd be all these big boys like looking like, oh, what are you doing here? Like, whatnot? Like, oh, you're going to smash you. And then I had on my back, I had the nickname Muscles, given to me by like the elder swimmers in my club, and they would poke fun of that, take the mick out of that, and I was always underestimated. But then when I got out of the pool and I beat them, it's just nothing feels better than that, right?
That is a sweetened taste of it.
100%.
So then with swimming, then did that at the time feel like maybe I'm going to make a career and the whole future, am I going to the Olympics? Like all of that must have been coming into your head.
I think naturally you think about it, but before I could get too carried away, that's when my disability started to really like kick into a gear and got worse. So I got older. As you go through growth spurts, naturally things happen, but then when you've got a connective tissue disorder, it gets a hell of a lot worse. So it was injury after injury after injury. My time in the pool reduced, and that was a really difficult time to be able to like keep at a sport. Being injured, like everyone knows, that's the hardest thing. But also when you're at an age where like you can't be stopped, like you want to be able to, I can do anything and everything. You can't tell me what I can't do. So it was one of those where I felt like I fell off the pace, and I was always, because I was late to develop as well, like going through puberty, I was really late. So it was always this kid that would come, a new kid every year when I went to like galas, that would just come out of nowhere. They've grown to like 6 foot tall. They've got hair sprouting everywhere. And they were just powerhouses, and they would beat me. And then, but I was always the one dotting around coming in second at like galas. And these people would come in one year, be gone the next year. because for them, they hadn't actually put the effort in to know how to stay in this game. And for me, that's what I guess was one of the biggest things, laying the foundations of a strong mindset, was I was blessed with being like held back my years in terms of like physically. I was always said that I was 2-3 years behind in my development. So for me, that was actually my biggest superpower. It meant I had to train harder. And for me, when I was like going through that period of time when I was injured, it's like, well, I know I can get there. I know I can. And that's when I first got turned into like naively building like a mindset that today I help other people cultivate. And that was, I think, as a lot of athletes can sort of compare to, is I was listening to like motivational speeches. I'd be getting out of training early, getting out of galas early because I'm just injured and frustrated with myself. I can't perform how I want to. I didn't care what other people thought. It was about myself. I had those perfectionist tendencies. I was diagnosed with OCD. So like I had like very perfectionist based tendencies. And the only thing that got me through that was listening to speakers like Les Brown, Inky Johnson, Eric Thomas.
I was going to say, this will come into a point later in conversation.
Yeah.
Actually. But yeah, I know I'm very, very well aware of those motivational speeches that you're probably listening to.
Love them. Like all of them, and like got clips from like Rocky and whatnot. And I would fill my brain with that information on the way to training, during, like obviously not while I'm swimming, but like when I was like, if I got out early, during gala days, I would fill my head with that information. And for me, that was what actually like kept me going. It was like that underdog story that I think everyone loves.
Interesting about that, because like I said, I reckon it will come up again in this conversation, but I wonder, in the way that we both have discussed so far on and off camera about how we think about certain things within the sports space, I wonder if it is as a result of some of those videos, because one of the things, and I don't want to get too far ahead of where we are in your sort of journey at the moment, but one of those things in those videos is they do teach you to be very self-aware and how to think about certain situations.
Yeah.
Now, interesting that you discovered them around that sort of age. I think I discovered them when I was around 17. And for me, that was my process of getting into university.
Oh, really?
So I've probably mentioned it before on the podcast, because I feel like there's quite a few people that have actually had the setback in their life around this sort of point.
Yeah.
But I came from a smart family. Like I'm very blessed to say that while there wasn't the history of university graduates or anything like that, there were smart people in my family. And so I had an ability when it came to education, things like maths and physics and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when it came to putting it down on paper in an exam, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so my AS, I struggled my way through GCSEs. The grades I got and came out with made it look like I didn't necessarily struggle.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of retakes along the way.
Yeah.
And then when it got to my AS levels, which I know it's different now, but then your AS levels counted and then your A2s also counted. They were separate entities. Now it's all one together. But my AS levels, I pretty much failed them all. And I didn't get any of my university offers as a result of doing badly when I did all my applications. So then I decided to retake all of my ASs at the same time as my A2s.
Yeah.
Huge arguments with all of my teachers saying, you're an idiot, you're self-sabotaging, you're not going to be able to manage the workload. And the only thing that stopped me agreeing with them and like refusing all like help from tutors or available things at school was like, I think I can do this because Eric Thomas has told me this story about some guy that he, like some guru that pushed a dude underwater. It's like, how bad do you want it? Like all the, and like,
imagine breathe.
There are some people that will find them incredibly cringy, and like, fair enough. If that's not what gets you going, fine. But as a young 17-year-old, those videos turned my life around. And I mean, I got into university. I got the grades I wanted because I basically put that into practice. So for you, with swimming not necessarily being the thing that's going to take you to the Olympics or anything like that, education is something that you can't ignore. You then probably had to start looking at universities as well. How did the motivational speeches help you get through university applications?
I resonate with everything you just said there, Angus. Honestly, like to a T, almost like parallel lives. It's an interesting thing. There's a lot of things there that I think I'd want to pick up on. For like to follow on from that conversation, like, yes, people can see them as cringy, but do they evoke emotion? Any movie evokes emotion, and it can have meaningful change and spark you to, I don't know, be a better parent, for example, or like, I don't know, be a better person in a relationship. Like these things evoke emotion. It doesn't matter how they deliver it. It's there for you at the right time. And I think something like that, it arrived at the right time for you. Same for me. And I think academically, I was always like, I never really, I've worked with a lot of athletes one-to-one in therapy sessions on like faulty beliefs and things that hold them back, like being able to identify as an athlete and stuff like that. I identified heavily as a kid as not that smart because I was surrounded by intelligent people. But when I think about it, I was always on top tables. Well, that used to be a thing in our school. I was always in top sets. And it was because, as you said there, I struggled with exams. I did really well, but it wasn't as well as I thought I could do. Like the result was never as good. I was like, that's not a reflect. Like I was an A star student, but I got an A or a B. It's like,
that was exactly the situation I was in. Yeah.
That's not reflective of who I know I am. And I think there's something there that, again, I failed my first year of college as well. And just literally straight U's and D's. It was just awful. And I had to think about what to do. And I think this is where the athletic background, and I'm like pleased to hear, like see what you've done, is that the athletic background there was the thing. It wasn't the fact that, all right, I need to get these high grades, I need to get these high grades. It was the mindset to be able to just keep going no matter what. I'd failed so many times as an athlete that when I failed academically, like rather than being consumed by it, I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to try and find a way forward to be able to get to university. And for me, I went down the BTEC route, which I know a lot of people may have misconceptions or certain sort of predetermined conceptions about. But the reality is I did my A-levels in maths, chemistry, biology, and physics because I was trying to prove to myself that I was smart. I got the grades from my GCSEs, but I was trying to prove that I was smart. My friends were doing them. They were very intelligent as well. In reality, I was really good at psychology at school. I should have done psychology. I love PE. I should have done PE. I did enjoy math, so that was fair enough. But I should have chose my options a bit. And I loved history. I should have done history in reality. But instead, I chose things I thought, I'm smart at these. And this is what a smart person does. But I failed that first year. And then I decided to do the BTEC, and all the content was the same, but the difference was it wasn't like one focus point of like recalling information. My memory is terrible. I struggle to recall information, and I hate doing that. I prefer to like show people my knowledge by doing project-based work. I've always loved that. So
I was big on coursework.
Yeah.
Huge on coursework. And the thing that always annoyed me about exams was that you don't really have exams in life.
Yeah.
Like the whole purpose of project and doing coursework is that you put a piece of work together over a time period, admittedly, usually 12 hours before the deadline. But like you have the tools and you have the facilities and you take the knowledge you have to utilize other resources of knowledge to bring in and make a good piece of work. Whereas when you're in an exam, you can sit down and there's a question that you were absolutely not prepared for through fault of your own or not.
Yeah.
And that's the story. That's where you lie. That could be where that career ends.
Yeah.
At that age.
Literally, and I remember I studied mock exams so much that when I was sat down and the questions weren't where I expected them to be, I was like, oh, I didn't prepare for this. So I couldn't answer them. So that's where my grades just flunked. And what I did when I did that 2-year BTEC, I finished it faster than anyone. I was the person in class everyone went to. So I know like people have like distinction star or whatnot. I got 100%. I didn't miss a single, because you can miss piece of coursework. I didn't miss a single thing. I got 100% in everything because I was devoted to it. I finished my course 4 months early before anyone else. So I spent the summer before going to university learning penny stocks, like trading, because I was just that's the type of person I am. I was like, I'm going to do this early because why not? Like I can. I was teaching my teacher things. They didn't know I was taking the class and teaching people that weren't able to like understand certain concepts because I'd already done that piece of coursework ages ago. It was like going to the extremes of like we had to be doing astronomy and we're doing about like different constellations. I went to the point of like getting my camera out, going into the middle of a field, getting what are they called? I haven't done this in ages now, but to actually help open the remote shutter, to just get like star trails. I didn't need that for my coursework, but I did it anyway because it was like that's just the person I am. I was like, I just will do everything and anything, and the grades that I got on my A level or my AS level won't be a reflection of me. And when I got into Loughborough for university, which Loughborough was the only place I was going to go to, by the way. I know a fellow Loughborough alumni here.
Same. Yeah.
Like the sport university, that's where I'm going to go. I want to do sports psychology. Like this seems perfect. I remember growing up, I would see all the swimmers with the purple hats. I was like, this seems like the place to be. So Loughborough or nothing, that was for me. I wasn't going to go to university if I didn't go to Loughborough. And for 2 weeks, I didn't think I was going to go to Loughborough because I got a rejection letter from Loughborough because they read my grades wrong on my report. Yeah,
Wow.
they didn't think I had the English grade, but my mum, like, fortunately pushed me to like challenge it, and they came back like, oh, sorry, so sorry, we read your grades wrong. And then I went to Loughborough because I wasn't going to uni for a short period of time. Just those.
The irony that they read your English grade off. Incredible. But one of the interesting things about that, because our journeys are quite similar, we both ended up at Loughborough. And something that I would love to talk about is how that mental side of things, and this is the whole premise of the podcast, if people didn't understand, there isn't just a random capital S in the name Mindsets. It's there because it's a play on words between mindset and mind and sets, like when you're in a gym or when you're doing any training. So the mental connection and the physical connection in sport and in fitness. One thing that whole process, using the motivational videos and passing those exams taught me was you can have talent and you can have drive, and if you put the two together, it's great.
Yeah.
But the classic cringy saying, I guess, is that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And that's what it taught me. And so the way that I conquered my fear of the exam going in was I did, between my mock exams that I did in January and when I took my actual exams in like June-ish, I didn't stop revising from my mocks to my actual exams.
Jeez.
So I crucified my social life, everything, and I put it in the bin because I was kind of driven to do so, and it seemed like it was a great idea at the time. But essentially what that meant was, you can imagine that's quite a lot of days of revision. And I had a limited number of subjects that I was revising for. So by the time I came to an exam, I had done every single past paper. And we're not talking about the ones that are in the UK. I had done all the international baccalaureate past papers, everything, at least 3 times.
Yeah.
So when I sat down in that exam, and in particular my maths exam, and maths was always the one I felt the most pressure on, I turned the page on my year's exam, and the first page was a question format that had never come up before in the UK system. And I remember looking around and seeing all my friends panicking because all their revision has just gone out the window on the very first page. And the thing with that being the very first question was it just basically ruined the headspace of everyone for the rest of the exam.
Yeah.
The problem was for everyone else, or the fortunate thing for me, I should say, is that almost identical question format had come up 3 years beforehand in a French maths exam paper that was the international standard. So I knew exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
And what that taught me wasn't necessarily that you get lucky,
but
it was, if you do all the preparation you can do, then you'll succeed. Which is at the time, something I thought was so intelligent. It was like, I'm not massively intelligent, I'm just resourceful. That's what will carry me through life.
Yeah.
And then I started to take that into everything I did, including sport. And the problem is, life and sport actually doesn't necessarily work like that. It's not so black and white. So if we take the example, and I mentioned this to you beforehand, but I used to play American football when I was at Loughborough, and I would be up until sometimes 2, 3 in the morning, the night before a game, watching game film of the other team, so that I felt when I got on the pitch, I had seen everything they ever did. Therefore, they could never do anything to surprise me, and I would almost know what they were going to do before they did it.
Yeah.
And again, in one particular game, exactly that happened. I knew they were going to do something. They did it. We scored a touchdown. Great. Happy days.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what that ended up teaching me again and reinforced was that if I watch everything, I know what's going to happen. Nothing will surprise me. And like I said, sport and life doesn't work like that. So I would go into a game, I would expect something to happen. It wouldn't. And now I panic because I don't have a backup plan. And you can't have a million backup plans whilst also having a million plan A's. So all of a sudden, I started to discover that my sports performance was negatively impacted to a degree by my preparation. I was over preparing, which was causing me to fail, rather than preparing, well, the other saying, which is if you don't prepare, you prepare to fail.
Yeah.
I was over preparing, which was causing failure. And so in the end, what I had to do was I actually had to take all of the technology that was available for me to watch film and study the other team away from myself 48 hours beforehand. So I couldn't overthink it.
Smart.
And then when I got on there on game day, the whole purpose was to be the athlete and like have an idea, because you kind of know, but at the end of the day, you can only react to what's in front of you.
Isn't it interesting how you've got two sides of Angus there. Like you've got athlete Angus that like reacts on instinct and like in that moment, and you got like analytical like Angus.
And it's a constant fight, and it happens today. We'll get to this with hierarchs, which is as you said, you're linked with get ahead mindset, and you yourself are taking on hierarchs. But it is a thing that I allow myself to be the engineering, which is what I studied, kind of data nerd freak, trying to understand everything about how to improve on those tiny 0.1%, let alone 1%. But then when it comes to the actual activity, I have to switch it all off and try and have fun, because that is the only way that I ever see the benefit of all the work that I put in on the side. Because otherwise I overthink, I stress out, and I lose the mental battle before the physical battle's even started.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to, I mean, we'll continue to talk about that, but you, as a result of what you were diagnosed with and that battle itself, had to change your thinking with swimming when you got to Loughborough University. And I wanted to wonder, as you moved towards bodybuilding, which you kind of got into at university, with your course being sports psychology, did you feel that you were almost getting psychological help in that process?
No.
Not at all.
No, not at all, because your degree does not prepare you. As I'm sure most people can probably relate to, you do a degree, you learn a lot of stuff, but how much do you absorb and actually put into practicality? Like, you just don't. It wasn't until post-grad that I started going, okay, what are these things that I need to apply? Like, yes, I learned a lot about theories, great theories, but nothing that was actually going to be like really, really applicable until I sort of started learning actual application of psychology. What helped me more at that early stage was those motivational videos. But then one thing that they didn't do, so what you just raised out, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's awesome.
It's actually something that I've kind of wanted to talk about. I've not really had and this isn't any shade on the other guests, but I've not had the right person to kind of talk about that with. So yeah.
I love the fact that you shared that, because what you've sort of done there is you've now gone back to actually the core root of where that belief or that approach has come from. There was a point in your life where there was like a failure, something didn't go right, and the coping mechanism there was, I need to prepare for every eventuality so that whatever happens, I have the answer, I have the result. In that situation, in an academic scenario, that makes sense, I guess, doesn't it, really? Like, because you are being quizzed. But when it comes to like a set play in American football, okay, there could be a quiz, what's the solution here? But most of sport is being flexible and being able to adapt into an environment and to what happens in front of you, because human behavior is not predictable. Yes, we can predict it to a certain degree, but maybe not to the nth degree that you were trying to predict it to, which when we come to a paper, we can probably predict that because it's just questions and answers. But there's more nuance in human behavior. So it's interesting that coping mechanism worked so well in that field, but then started to undo in other areas when you try to apply it. And it's interesting now that that's become something that, do you remember, just out of curiosity, do you remember that sort of personality trait before college, before A-levels? Did you have that?
So it's interesting, really. I, in hindsight, would say that I used to be lazy.
Okay.
Because when I played rugby, I wasn't bad once I discovered the position. I loved playing fullback. At the time, I wasn't tall, so they didn't force me into the forwards.
Yeah.
I loved playing fullback because I loved the pressure of being the last person that could make a tackle, that kind of thing. But I had to be put under, and to a degree still, I have to be put under severe pressure to act. And so when I remember being 14, 15, and the head coach of my rugby team at the time was, really pressing on us getting in the gym.
Yeah.
That's going to make the difference. And I remember almost feeling like a victim, like being attacked. Like, I'm 15. Don't tell me I need to be in the gym. Like, who are you controlling my life? I do this for fun. I'm here to play rugby and enjoy it with my friends. And in hindsight, he was literally just telling us to prepare our bodies. Like, that's what he was doing. And I took it as an attack because I was too lazy to put the work in around training. Yeah. Training twice a week was already a lot for me at the time. And like, don't get me wrong, I loved sport. But it was like, I'm not a full-time athlete. I'm not being paid to do this. Like, who's doing that?
Yeah.
And once I started to have failure as a result of my laziness and my inaction, that's when I started to switch on and be like, this is literally, it's one of those, again, it's the victim mentality. Like, you might be a victim of something, but it is also still your job to deal with that. It's your responsibility to take action and fix it.
Yeah.
And that's really where that came from. But I think I almost went to the opposite end of the scale as a result of it.
And it's interesting the way you said that you need pressure to be able to promote action. And I think a lot of people fall on this spectrum in different points where they need no pressure, they don't need micromanagement or anything like that, of that nature, to be able to actually work, or do whatever it might be, maybe if it's at work or whether it's a training session, whatever. But other people need a severe amount of pressure to even get to that point of activating action. And it sounds for you, you found a way, a really intuitive way that's quite smart when you think about it from like a developmental perspective of like as a child, of how to artificially create that pressure through your brain, rather than externally having your coach telling you need to do these things. It was in your head. It's like failure is the outcome if you don't prepare to the nth degree. And that in itself, when we get to the root of that, is now an anxiety-based thing. And anxiety being, people say this all the time and gets confused, but high function anxiety of like, you need anxiety to be able to even perform or take action. Great. But where do we put the cap on it? Because it gets to a point where we overflow with the anxiety and it impedes performance. Because we get to this, in your position, the anxiety sparks an over preparedness, which then becomes analyzing things. So if it's set plays in American football, if it's in high rocks, it might be heart rate zones, for example, right? So when we're in that position, what we do is, if that data is not just, when we see it, is not just data, it actually has like a deeper meaning of like, you're not ready, you're going to fail. That's what the outcome is tied to. Then when we see it, we naturally have that sort of over analysis that occurs in our brain. And what can spark from that is inaction, because we get to a point of buffering where we've got too much information, as said to you earlier. So 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information is what the brain can actually process. That's our cognitive load. Pretty basic psychology. But we don't really pay attention to it because day to day, we don't really have to worry about those things. We let a lot of the information in our environment just bypass us, and we try to focus on certain things. But when it comes to race day, say for example, in a high rock scenario, there is an abundance of information. And if you're someone who wants to be prepared and you're absorbing all that information, it's like the computer says no, naturally. And then you paralysis by analysis.
I think like it's so nice to have everything. Well, it's nice to have the discussion and know that like there is a whole thing that is studied, and I'm not just like a complete weirdo with it. Because I wanted to ask you, in your personal opinion, with your own journey through swimming, with being able to kind of have the excuse of that you have an invisible disability,
Yeah.
and then moving into bodybuilding, getting on stage, and actually, I mean, clearly having done quite well from your show and tell and what you mentioned about it being a whole weekend thing. But would you say as a person that you're driven more by fear of failure or by the attraction of success?
Yeah, great question. If you'd asked sort of 14, 15-year-old Robin, he'd probably said success, but the reality, it would have been fear of failure, without a shadow of a doubt. It's a good question, because I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from my invisible disability, someone with OCD who is highly sort of like prepared and anxious about things. I was hospitalized at the age of 17, not because of a physical impediment, because of a mental impediment that was manifesting physically. I got to this point where I was getting terrible cramps in my stomach, like horrific cramps. And there are certain sort of ways I say, okay, maybe it's my digestive system, because I got IBS, got a terrible digestive system. Maybe it was something to do with that. But my diet was fine. There was no problem with that. I was trying to figure out what was the problem. And what sort of came out of it was I had an enlarged spleen. They thought it was appendicitis, it was an enlarged spleen. But it had come as a result of tension, being too tight, being in this fight or flight stage of my life where I was like sort of just always on edge, always anxious, always worried about things. And that was high performance in the swimming pool, high performance like in any sort of form of training, but also, like I spoke to you about with college, like extreme detail, and like I need to set these standards excessively high. And I was walking around life with this boiling point all the time. And I remember having breakdowns at certain points as a kid because I was worried about what was to come. And like, I sort of, the way I conceptualize it is, I'm not afraid of what I won't become. What I will become. I'm afraid of what I won't become, because I've got this expectation of this is what I need to be. Like, this is where I need to be. And if I don't get that, then I haven't made it. So that's a lot of weight to be carrying around as a youngster. So I was in hospital for 4 days on morphine because I mentally was putting too much pressure on myself. mentally, not physically, but it was manifesting physically. 2 days later, after 4 days in hospital, I got released. It was the first time I qualified for nationals at swimming. And I was like, are you going to go? I was like, yeah. So I guess I didn't learn much in that situation.
Well, it's kind of points now as well. In society, there's so much overstimulation from, I mean, how many people listening to this are listening to this while they might be looking at a computer screen while scrolling on Instagram at the same time? And you've immediately got 3 things in there. While at the same time, when you're talking about these 7 plus or minus 2 thoughts, you might have a meeting coming up. You know you need to send that email before you go home from work, but you also need to decide what you're having for dinner.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all of these things are going on and you are stressing yourself out. But then at the end of the day, when you go back and you look at what you did today, was work today busy? Of course, the natural response is, yeah, it was crazy busy. But you think about this specific moment. If you were to reflect on this specific moment, if you are double or triple screening and then you're thinking about what you're having for dinner, all of these things, you would probably look at that point in a third person view and be like, I was really chilled out then. Because I was sat at my desk, I was able to scroll on my phone while I was not doing any work. I wasn't sending those emails. And so you, on paper or physically look like you're chilled out.
Yeah.
But in reality, your brain is going haywire. You've got so much to juggle.
Yeah.
And especially for athletes or people that care about their fitness, you then go to an environment where you try and perform physically and you wonder why you have a shit time. And it's because mentally,
you're drained.
You're absolutely drained. And we don't learn from it.
Look at the example of like when you went into an exam in school, you sat on your arse for 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, came out exhausted, needing a nap. You didn't do physically anything but move your wrist a little bit. Mentally, you are drained, trying to recall information, working out your brain in that environment. We know that there is a mental like energy expenditure. So in that situation, I think like if we're trying to attend to too many things, naturally our brain's going to be like, oh mate, just chill out for a second, honestly. So as a kid, I was always hyperactive on that, like always, what is the next thing? What do I need to do? And then when you add in the pressure of like expectations on yourself, that's what I say the biggest thing that my disability taught me that you can't always show up and perform the way that you want to perform. And that was the biggest lesson because I remember like I sat down with a psychologist and when I first got diagnosed at the age of 17, intelligently ignorant, energy beyond belief, the world like at my fingertips. And she told me, you got to get your expectations in check. I was like, fuck off. Like, not initially to her face, but fuck off.
Oh, yeah. If she was smart enough to know that, she knew you were in turn me saying fuck off.
Yeah. I was like, okay. So at the moment, I stopped going to see the psychologist. That was my first experience with psychology. I'm now a fitness psychologist. I guess I don't want to be that person. What I realized though, now reflecting on it, is what she was saying was true, but she just didn't deliver in the right message. I need to learn those things. So I need to learn it myself. And from my disability, I've learned that one day I can be fine. The next day, things are going to be real shit and real hard. If I'm always expecting 100% and I don't actually check in my body and my mind to see what the actual percentage is at my expenditure each day, like what do I have at my disposal, then I'm always going to be setting an unrealistic expectation that's going to yield anxiety. And I use this for my athletes all the time. We call it, I guess, the performance expectation gap. You expect when you go into a race, X performance. Let's say, I don't know, let's use just arbitrary numbers in a high rock scenario. I expect a 75-minute high rocks race. Let's say that. Okay, so 75-minute high rocks race, how much energy do you need at your disposal to be able to achieve that? I don't know, like, let's say 100% because it's going to be a PB for me, right? Okay, let's check in with you. Day of the race. Where's your energy levels right now? Have you had a good night's sleep? Have you had a good week? Have you tapered down nicely? How are you actually taking in the environment and the stimulation as we spoke about? Are you at 100% right now, or have you creeped down to 90% maybe, potentially? Or what is it? Well, as athletes, if we don't check in with where our energy levels are, and I'm using a race day scenario, this is for training too, because this happens every single day. We come in from work expecting a killer workout, but we don't have the energy to be able to do it. And then when we come out of the workout, or in high rocks race, we come out of the race and we don't do the time we want, we get so frustrated. It's because the expectation for performance was too high for what the actual performance reality we had, like the disposal. You only had 80% energy. So why would you expect an 100% energy performance? that is ludicrous. But our brains won't sort of process that. And in that gap here is the anxiety. Anxiety stems, we get annoyed at ourselves, frustrated, because we're like overwhelmed with the fact that why can't I perform to my expectations that I'm setting in my head? And this is where you get the perfectionism, which I'm all too familiar with, of like, you need to be able to hit those standards. And a perfectionist is going to hold you ransom to that unless you give it like an example of why you can't do that, or level the playing field and give it, like they say, a check in with, right, I'm mentally and physically drained right now. I'm not 100%. So why am I expecting 100%? And that can do more damage than good in that situation.
So here's an interesting thing that I've started doing.
Yeah.
Through a bit of an understanding of feeling let down on the day, to the point where even when I achieved, and this is a whole different discussion, but
Yeah.
let's say I'm the individual that says I want a 75-minute high rocks time.
Yeah.
I've built the entire training plan for it. Yes, it's had its ups and downs on the way, but the 75 minutes I think is a good target.
Yeah.
Let's say on the day I feel 80% and I somehow perform to a 95%. I really drag it through. I get myself across that line. I surprise myself for the given day.
Yeah.
But I cross the line and it's 74 minutes, 59 seconds. The person that I am would look up at the clock and be like, cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
I would just be like, I did the thing that was meant to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of, and then you don't get any reward from that. And then as a result of that, you set your expectations 5 minutes faster, let's say, for the next time.
Yeah.
And if you manage to do it, it's like another box ticked. You don't really get the enjoyment.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have started to do now, which will be interesting to know if this is something that's recommended or if I'm actually potentially hindering myself, is I'm around about 3-4 weeks out now of doing a particular race.
Mm-hmm.
For those that aren't huge on the knowledge of sports performance, a really good thing to do at this particular point in time is an intensification. So up the tempos, make training quite a bit harder, really get yourself race prepared, and then you taper off so that your body has a chance to recover before you go all out in this particular event. Now, whilst I'm doing that, a large amount of this intensification is not actually 100% in terms of how intense it is. So I might be pushing my race pace. I might be trying to go slightly over that, but I'm counteracting that with rest periods rather than doing what a lot of people might be doing at this point, is doing as many race simulations as they can to figure out where they're at. The reason for doing what I am doing is so that I can understand what my 80% looks like. And by having an 80%, I know on race day, realistically, if my prep doesn't go right, this is what I'm capable of doing, and I can hold myself to this standard, whatever happens.
Yeah.
However, on race day, if I feel good, now we're in unknown territory. And the thing that's so awesome, and if you haven't done this before, I would highly recommend trying to do it, is when you're in unfamiliar territory, it is the most fun.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, a bit like when you got in the pool with people that were way bigger than you, there is nothing more satisfying than overachieving.
Yes.
And so being able to set myself up in a position to overachieve means that I might actually be on some of my runs and I might be smiling in a situation where theoretically, as if you've been to a high rocks race, you won't see many people enjoying themselves. But there's a great phrase, which a couple of people that are very, very good at it, a previous guest, Charlie Botterill, very, very quick guy. He's having an incredible season so far. His main thing is fun is fast.
Yeah.
And it's that whole thing. If you sit in that band of overachieving in the unknown, you're constantly getting this hormone release of you're doing really, really well. And that reduces, and if we're talking about a psychological perspective, that reduces your relative perceived exertion.
Yeah.
Your RPE, which then allows you to push harder, which then allows you to go faster. And you kind of get caught in this positive cycle.
Yeah.
Rather than being caught in that classic cycle in endurance sports of how much longer do I have to do this exercise when it feels like I'm going to die.
And because of fear of failure, because I need to do it at this time, because that's the splits that I've worked out that I need to hit.
Exactly. So I'm now working off like an 80%. This is where I would expect myself to be. If this is where I hit on race day, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
If it's slower than that, we might need to have a bit of a review of what I'm doing at this point. But it gives me the room to have fun on race day, effectively.
Yeah. I like to compare it, I guess, to that sort of when you don't feel like going for a run. Like maybe people that let's go back to like your first time that you started getting into running. So you're going out for a walk, maybe a light jog. You don't really feel like it. So I can go for a light jog anyway. And then you come back and like you just posted like almost like a PB 5K time. It's like, that's pretty cool. Like that feeling feels amazing. And like you've artificially created that from what you're saying with your training. Like you're artificially creating an environment that's going to allow you to sit in that almost like fun phase, like of like being able to push myself hard. But when I'm pushing myself hard, I'm enjoying myself because it's having that sort of hormonal release of like, all right, you're in uncharted territory here. You're doing the unknown for you, right? But I think it depends on the type of person. Some people for that, when they're in the preparation for an event, would be like, that's not enough. I need to be preparing for 100% and there's no questions asked. Like that is what I need to achieve. So I think it's like horses for courses. Certain people will prefer that, other people won't. Some people, they'll want increasing the amounts of pressure to be able to perform. So for them, like shooting for the stars, like they need to be able to do that. Shooting for 100%, that will give them the pressure to be able to perform. Other people, you need to know how much pressure is optimal for you. Pressure is on a spectrum. This is not like emotions are on a spectrum. Pressure is on a spectrum. You feel anxiety. Okay, I feel a little bit anxious right now. Like I was coming into London, for example, like it can be quite anxious, like people around, but I wasn't like shitting myself, like a 10 out of 10 anxiety, right? So I needed some anxiety to make sure I was alert and I was like, make sure I was getting onto the right stop on the tube and stuff like that. When it comes to like race day, you need a bit of anxiety to make sure that you're getting ready for your race, going to the right place properly, getting yourself prepared. But if you get seeped over to that point of like an excess of anxiety, like you need to know where your threshold is. And for each person, that threshold is different. So for someone like yourself, where you're explaining there, maybe an 8 out of 10, I'm going to say 80%, 8 out of 10 anxiety is optimal for the best performance. Whereas for another person, it might be, I need 10 out of 10. I need to feel so anxious, so much pressure, so much stress to then yield that best performance. That's when I really do the good work.
And I think I used to think I was a 10.
Yeah.
And then through failure as a result, and then recognizing that it was actually as a result of being a 10 and just like not able to enjoy anything I did because I was just stressing about it. And then even if I did the thing that I was supposed to do, I was stressed about the next thing because of it. And one of the things that I also want to relate back to some of the motivational videos that you and I both watched.
You read my mind.
Was the whole thing that they taught me was visualization.
Okay.
So they put me, one of the large things they do is they make you imagine a scenario. Mm-hmm. So we briefly mentioned the one with Eric Thomas where there's, for those that haven't watched it, go and watch it because I'm not going to do the story justice. Basically, there's a guy that wants to understand how to be successful in business. He goes up to this business guru. The dude's like, meet me on the beach tomorrow at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
He goes to the beach. The guru's there and he's like, I thought you wanted to be successful. He's like, I do. He tells this dude to just walk out into the water. And he's like, this guy's crazy, but he does it. And he's like, keep walking out until the guru dunks his head under, holds it under until he's like really struggling to breathe. The guru picks up the guy out of the water and says, when you're underwater, what was the one thing you could think about? The guy beats around the bush, but ends up saying, I just wanted to breathe. And effectively, the guru says, when you want to be successful, as bad as you want to breathe, that's when you'll be successful. And another one, which is another bit of kind of external visualization, not necessarily for you as a person of yourself, but is a scenario to think about, which brought in the whole fear of failure for me, was you imagine you're on your deathbed and into that room before you pass walks in every version of you that you could have ever been had you not quit on yourself or had you made it. And so if you wanted to be a professional football player when you were a kid, a professional football player version of you walks into the room and is just staring at you.
Yeah.
If you wanted to be a pilot, if you wanted to be, I don't know, a finance bro at some point in your life, that version of you walks in and you're just sat there looking at all of these possibilities. Had you not given up on yourself, had you not given yourself the chance to actually pursue it? And for me, that's where I kind of start to think like, I just need to not quit on things. Because I don't ever want to have that thought. And sadly, having had that thought put into my head on my deathbed, that's probably exactly what I'm going to think about. But what that started to teach me was how powerful the brain is when it comes to what you can do mentally to think your way into a situation in advance. And that's something that I feel like I naturally started doing when it came to competition. And I want to know from your side, you probably understand it from two sides, as both as an athlete and also what you do in your work, which is actually how we met.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll leave it with you there to take on, and we can kind of go into how we met and what that kind of relates to.
Yeah, yeah. I think something first of all to note about that though, with the motivational speeches and like how they are so powerful and they do create real vivid, powerful images in your minds that get you up and want to go, especially when you got like such a powerful voice like Inky Johnson and Eric Thomas. Like it makes you want to get out your chair and just scream, right? And they do create powerful images. But then this is the thing to remember is what are they also instilling in your mind? And I think a lot of them is the part of them that didn't help me was that hustle culture. They do. It's like you'll go, you got to want it more than anyone else. You want to actually like more than you want to breathe. Like you got to like think about, oh, how bad it would be if you don't achieve this. Like they're very negative frames of like how to actually motivate yourself, which are really powerful in the start. I compare it to like the Star Wars analogy of the dark side, the light side. They're quite dark side thoughts. They're powerful. They're really strong, but you might end up like face down in a molten lava with like only one hand. Not ideal, right? You know? Whereas at the light side, you could turn into a ghost and live on in the force. That's pretty sick. So like the light side thoughts are really powerful as well, but they're slower burners. And what happens with constantly those motivational speeches constantly demanding building images of fear in your head, you're not acting from a place of growth rather than run. So I use the analogy when it comes to anxiety, are you running towards something or running away? Are you the predator or the prey? And I think in those situations, it really sort of stems sort of like the prey mentality of like we're actually running away from something, of the fear of not becoming. When I said earlier about I'm afraid of what I won't become, again, it's that same mentality I've built, like just from athletics, but also from listening to these like motivational speeches, incredibly powerful. But they did also a lot of damage in that regard when it came to that sort of process of thinking. But on your note there, I thought I'd have to mention that, but on your note there about the images, it shows how powerful they can be and how as humans, we buy into stories. That's how we learn things best. And visualizing things, seeing things happen. We're very like some people like naturally humans, we're visual learners. We need to see things happen, right? For example, is there flat or round, right? That whole argument. Well, I know it's round because I've seen satellite images.
I'm not going to get into the argument. I do actually agree with you. I want to make that clear. But yeah, I don't need the listeners to be thrown by that one.
But like that's we see things and then we learn and we believe, right? And like creating images. So when you watch movies, they evoke emotion because you see things and you really follow the character. So one of those other motivational speeches, I think it's Eric Thomas or Inky Johnson telling a story of Buster Douglas and how he beat Mike Tyson, and like how the fact that his mum had passed and like taking you through that like period. Like when we watch X Factor or Britain Got Talent, it's always these sob stories, right? But it buys into characters. And that's what imagery does too, but it just puts you in the driving seat. You are the vehicle, seeing yourself in different scenarios as that main character and feeling those emotions to try and evoke them and evoke change. So, for example, I guess what we did when we saw each other, it was at Get Ahead's pre-race High Rocks imagery, preparation for London. And like you say, got people sitting down. As soon as I saw them, eyes shut, let's get some Hans Zimmer on in the background.
Quite literally, we all walked into a room and you were stood there and you said, everyone just wants to take a seat or, lie down, just close your eyes. And immediately I thought, this is my kind of High Rocks. And then, yeah, you put the music on and you started speaking.
Yeah.
This is actually something I wanted to bring into the podcast. This has never been done before, on this podcast at least. And for those of you listening, if you've made it this far, you're probably quite intrigued by it, I would imagine. But I would encourage you, even if you're not sure about it, if you aren't currently supposed to be working in the office, maybe save this for later if you are, but give this a go, because I think Robin's going to take us through one.
Yeah.
And I really hope that you guys get as much out of it as I did the first time. So yeah, I'll hand over to you to kind of explain it and take us through it.
Nice. Yeah. So I hadn't completely prepared for it, but I've got notes on my phone, so I'm going to try and follow that to a T. But the idea is we're going to do a Confidence Plus imagery. The idea of Confidence Plus is like any of your streaming platforms like Disney Plus, going to take you on a journey of trying to unlock your confidence. I think confidence is one of those states that can be quite fleeting for some, and we struggle to feel it in certain moments. And it can feel a bit like well, how do I feel confident? This is a way to be able to bolster your confidence in those situations, whether it's going into a meeting, about to go compete in a High Rocks race, join a new workout class. Load this up for 5 minutes before you're about to get into the class. Listen to this, and yeah, you'll be going in there more confident than ever. So Should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm not gonna necessarily partake. I'm probably gonna do the visualization, but I'm not gonna do the thing where I sit with my eyes closed because I'd feel really awkward for Robin at the moment being sat in this room with me like that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But I will put some nice calming. Do you want calming music with this?
Yeah, like some
Calming music on that's gonna start, now, and in your own time, take us through it.
Nice. So first of all, find a nice comfortable position. Sit yourself down, lay down, have your eyes closed, and start to breathe. Now when you breathe in, we don't need to do anything complicated here. Just a nice deep breath. Breathing in for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathing out for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now continue to breathe. As you breathe in, feel your diaphragm fill. And as you exhale, feel your chest soften and relax. Find some comfortable breaths. Now as you continue to breathe, I want you to imagine that you're transported to your sofa at home. You're sitting down in front of your TV with your favourite snack in one hand and your remote in the other. Take yourself to that place now. As you sit there, using the remote, you load up Netflix. Whether you've got Netflix or not, today you've got a subscription. And see all the top picks present in front of you, all your suggested shows. As you start to browse all the shows on Netflix, you start to realize that the thumbnails and the titles are from scenes in your life. You've got the dramas, you've got the comedies, you've got those thrillers, and you've got those inspirational stories. Start to see those populate your Netflix. Now with your remote, I want you to navigate to the Genres tab and find Confidence. Select that for me and load up the screen with all these confidence thumbnails. Clips from your life. They could be back to things that you did in school, achievements in your first team, or academically, or it could be from your last high rocks race or from a training session. Bring all those thumbnails up to mind, all these little clips, these highlights, where you have been confident. As you see all those scenes, I want you to navigate to your top picks. Start to think which one there resonates with you most. The one that really lights that fire in your belly. When you think of that, you feel confident. Try to grab that scene right now. Now hopefully you found that pick. And with your remote, I want you to press play and let that scene unfold in front of you, as if you're a fly on the wall or if you are looking through the lens of your own eyes. Who's there? What are you doing? Where are you? Try to vividly bring, scene by scene, that picture to life. Remember every detail. Everything that was said, everything that was done in that moment. As you relive that image and you play it over and over in your mind, I want you to feel that tingle that starts to come in your fingers and your toes. And that fire that starts to burn in your belly as you feel the confidence from that scene. Building bigger and bigger. You remember what it feels like to be confident. to have self-belief in yourself, to know that you can conquer despite the odds. Now, as you sit there on the edge of your sofa, filled to the brim with elation from this scene, hold in one thing in your mind, that reason why you can be confident. You hit the power button on your remote, and the screen goes to black. Nice.
Wow. Very good. Like I said, I was trying almost not to do it, but at the same time, it's very easy to slip into it. For anyone who that might be their first experience of it, that's not the one that we did a couple of weeks ago, and it was nice to hear a different one. But could definitely feel those emotions when I first did it, and I think it's what you highlighted at the time is we do a lot of work training our bodies, but not a lot of work training our minds, and doing that sort of thing. And kind of thinking about yourself in that sort of way allows you to feel those emotions that can be often hard to replicate without really devoting time to it and training for it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with imagery. It's one of those where there's lots of different ways that you can utilize it. Like you can utilize it when you need to build confidence in that moment, or like say in a training situation, if you want to feel prepared for something, you can go through the motions of first experiencing anxiety, building anxiety in your body, like feel that sensation of where is it? Is it in your chest? Most commonly people feel it in their chest. Is it in your stomach? Is it in your head? How do you feel that anxiety right now? Pre-race. Now let that grow to a point where it's like really starting to overcome you. Now see that slowly subside. And we do that through that process of creative imagery, to help you actually see yourself, feel the emotions of anxiety, and then see it actually slowly regress as well. But then you can also go through a process, like it's a Stoic principle called inversion, where you see things going wrong and then yourself actually overcoming them despite the odds. So we know there's things that can go wrong in a high rocks race. Let's say maybe it's someone grabs the weight in front of you and you're like rushing around to try and grab the weights, or like you stumble and fall, or like you go through the wrong like in and out, like it happens, right? You're tired. You can't really prepare for that until like you're in that moment. But imagery can be a process where you escape for a moment, imagine yourself in those scenarios, but then imagine yourselves overcoming it or feeling composed once it occurs. So that means that once we're in that situation, if we haven't experienced it already, we already have a million times in our mind. Like those past papers that you've done. You knew when you sat down the exam, I've done all these papers before. Well, they're mock exams for a reason. Like you can do the mock. Well, you can do high rock sims, but not many of them replicate the same amount of pressure in the environment. So that's one way imagery can be used. Other ways is like what we just did there, where it's like building emotions like confidence and stuff like that.
Well, the impact that had not only on myself, but on all the other people that were in the room, invoked the desire to get involved in what is actually the next section of the podcast, which is a listener question. So again, being a little bit different from some podcasts that are out there, but I love to have people that listen get involved
Nice.
and ask questions that are really true to them or might hold a particular meaning. So I have 3 questions.
Cool.
And I will go through them actually in order. I don't need to change the order because of our discussion in any way. I think I'm going to start off with Travis, who is actually a previous guest. If you aren't aware of who Travis is, he's got many records now for various things, most notably burpees. He's just absolutely rapid at them. But Travis has got a very interesting story himself. And one of his biggest things that he finds he and other athletes struggle with is overcoming that voice that tells you to stop mid-event, mid-competition, mid-race, when things are getting tough. So his question is, what's the biggest mental tip for someone who wants to stop mid-race?
Oh God, they want to stop. Well, I think it's an interesting question. Like, cheers, Trev, for that as well. I appreciate it. Always hit me with the hard hitters, eh? So I think that voice undoubtedly comes into your mind, right? And there is a point when sometimes our voice is correct, but naturally we have a fear response that when our body starts to feel pain of any sort, it's going to start to come into the fold. It's going to start asking the question, should we stop? And I think naturally it's building that relationship with the voice. And I think what you'll see, there was a study done with like ultra marathon runners and how they can actually push themselves to such like crazy limits compared to someone who like in pain, tolerating pain. And the reason why is because that when that voice comes into the head, it's not necessarily the pain threshold may not be higher, but it's actually being able to sit with the voice that's telling them to stop. And now for healthy reasons or unhealthy reasons, because for some point you need to listen to that voice, let's be honest. But my biggest tip, I guess, would be to not beat around the bush too much, is that when you're actually in the race, it's quite hard to be able to do anything logical, right? You are shattered, you're tired. The fear response is going to be, the amygdala is going to be the thing driving most of your actions. So in this case, a lot of the work needs to be done prior to that. Sitting, getting to the point, like remember that whole Muhammad Ali quote of like, he doesn't start counting reps until he's tired. Well, this voice doesn't come out until you're tired as well. And that's when the real mental work is done, in experiencing that. And like anything, it's a relationship. So for example, you had your parents shout in your ear telling you to stop. Imagine it like that type of scenario, separating from, not seeing as this is your whole self. Your brain has many different thoughts, many different feelings, and not all of them are going to be reliable or helpful for the situation. As I say, it gets to a point where maybe you do need to listen to it, but maybe when you're starting to get a stitch in your side, do we need to? We start to catastrophize. And what we need to go for a process is decatastrophizing that. Actually getting checked in with, okay, I hear you. Because what happens is when we get these negative thoughts, or what a lot of us will do is suppress them and push them down. And I use the analogy of like a beach ball on holiday. You push the ball underwater, you sit on it and float around. But the moment you let go, it flies to the surface, even flies out and hits you in the face, right? I can't be the only one that's done that, right? Like it happens, you know? So let's imagine thoughts on the surface of the pool here, and the ball is the fault. We push it down and suppress it. But then when it shoots up, it doesn't just come to the surface, it blasts past as well. So that's why in the race, it'll come back even more powerful towards the end. Or not necessarily towards the end, but later on in the race. So going through a process of acknowledging the voice rather than just shut up, get out of my head. Maybe that'll work for a short period of time, and maybe when it's a sprint, you don't need to worry about that. I worked with an athlete recently, short course. He had no problem with his negative thoughts because, like, in swimming, I mean short course, so like doing 50s, 100s. But when it got to 200s or 400s, that's when the voice would start kicking in, and it's like, okay, your suppression worked for a period of time in short races, but not in long-term races. So, tips: get familiar with that voice. It's part of you. You can't eradicate it. So don't try to like just eliminate it or suppress it, because if you try to suppress it, it's going to come back more powerful. So diffuse it, acknowledge it, hear it out, listen to it, then decatastrophize it. Say, look, like I understand why you're feeling this way, because yes, I am pushing my heart rate quite high here, but the reality is like I'm not dying. And I think that those would be the most, I guess, the process I would try to follow. I wouldn't want to make it any more complicated during a race, because you can't think about too many things during a race.
It's interesting seeing it broken down, because the way that I've always thought about how I deal with the voice is bargaining.
Okay.
Like, I bargain. So
Yeah.
like, and I guess that's me acknowledging it. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, if we take an example of something that a lot of people will hear, that specific point where it's like, stop, quit, whatever it is, telling you to just end whatever the race is now.
Yeah.
I've had that feeling before. I have it quite consistently when I train, and you get very familiar with it, but it will be, okay, fine. Like, I'll stop if I feel this way in 5 minutes time.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. So I'll listen to you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You give me 5 minutes, I'll give you what you want.
Yeah.
5 minutes comes along and I'm like, well, that 5 minutes was fine. So I'm going to give myself another 2 minutes or another 3 minutes. And I'll keep doing that until I get to a point where I'm like, look, in 10 minutes we'll be done.
Yeah.
So in 10 minutes, you can run riot with whatever you want, but for the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to get this done, and then you can be whatever you want to be. And so I feel like I'm constantly bargaining with myself, which, don't get me wrong, can be exhausting mentally.
Yep.
But I'm not trying to shut it off and then have it reappear in a worse way.
So I love that. So what you've just done there is conceptualized the voice, and that's what it is. You need to be able to make it tangible. The thing is, my main job as a psychologist is making the abstract tangible. Like we spoke about with the stories and whatnot, we need to be able to see things, we need to see them happening, to be able to actually first of all be able to make a change. So what you've done there is, and I hope you realize it, is you've made that voice like a child, almost. The maturity level of a child. And you've bargained with it, the same as you would with a child when they're asking to, I don't know, for a treat or whatnot, or they want to, well, how long till we're there? Like, okay, I want to stop walking. Like, okay, give it a couple more minutes and then we'll see then. And hopefully they go a bit quieter, but at least you've acknowledged them. If you don't acknowledge a child, they'll throw the toys out the pram, they'll be kicking and screaming. And that, I would argue, is more mentally draining than doing the bargaining method. But that's a long-term play, which for a lot of people, they don't see the long-term play. They want like a short, quick fix of, all right, I just need to get rid of it, eradicate it right now, get out of my mind. It'll come back kicking and screaming, and that'll be more draining.
Well, here's another mindset that someone wants some help with.
Okay.
So Jason, who's also actually another previous guest, but far longer ago, earlier on in the year, I'm aware from his personal situation, I'm not going to bring too much into it, but there's a bit of a career change. There's kind of a bit of self-searching there to a degree. What advice would you give to a person that's got an all or nothing mindset and constantly finds himself flipping between the two?
Yeah, I really do appreciate that because I've been in that situation far too often. All or nothing mindset, I guess, comes down to, that sort of perfectionist type of tendency, right? I mean, so we're talking about this in like a corporate setting, right? Or just in general?
Just also in life, in terms of because not necessarily just for this, not necessarily just for Jason, but for a lot of people trying to pick a new sport.
Yeah.
Is like a big one. And I found, I did American football. I was all in on it. And then I went nothing on anything in sport apart from I just keep fit in the gym. And then I don't want to be that guy. I found High Rocks and like I've gone not all in on it. Like I'm not trying to become a pro at it, but I've gone all in with my efforts in terms of my training into that specifically.
Yeah.
So I think there's that as well as, people are probably doing the same with their career as well.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of like, everyone will have their own little processes of how to navigate all or nothing behaviors. But first of all, being aware that you're doing it, like knowing that I am the type of person that will just go into something hell for leather and then stop. Good awareness, first of all, really good awareness. But then moving forward, we need to be able to get to a point where we can actually, almost like the bargaining method there, of like setting realistic sort of milestones. I think people like that, what is harder for you is the harder thing. Just go, like I would posit that when you go into a New Year's resolution, you'll be the person, easy. I'm just going to have like dry January. Easy. I'm going to do it super easy. Move on to the next thing. It'll be super simple for you. The harder thing for you, the more challenging thing, if we were to reframe the situation there, is to actually take it slow. Like that in terms of like, all right, I've got Monday to Saturday, Sunday here of like training days. I've just got into High Rocks training. I'm going to go class on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Great. Love it. Next week, I'm burnt out. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I can't make it anymore. I'm going to stop. Well, that in that sense, you're going to obviously burn out. That's the all or nothing, right? It's the same thing with dieting. It's like, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to pick the best diet possible.
I'm going to go zero carbs.
Exactly. And like do something that's not actually long-term adherable. Like we can't actually continue that because it's just not realistic. It's not got the balance for you in life, right? And I think for a lot of people, they experience that, say, in different areas, but it's acknowledging that, okay, what is the harder thing? The harder thing is to actually taking it slow. Like I've got to look at my goal. My goal isn't short term here. It is a long term play. And what do I want? I think a really good like sort of journal prompt for someone is, what do I want my life to look like, or my general week to look like in 6 months' time? So when you're starting this new thing in 6 months' time, what do I want the week to look like? Now, from that point of view, you can build up to that. That is a goal. That's a process that you want to live, that life you want to live. I feel so. My experience with this has been that all or nothing behavior being sort of, and you popped it on the story the other day, is I was held ransom to a standard. We spoke about expectations. If you have the all or nothing behaviors, you set an expectation for yourself that isn't realistic to maintain. So what happens is you don't actually engage with that behavior next week, because if you want to go to the gym, you're going to have to go meet that crazy standard that you set for yourself. You're building resistance, actively building resistance, when you really don't need any more resistance about to do something. So taking it slow, setting your goals properly, so making sure that they are like progressively overloading. We do this in the gym all the time. We know what progressive overloading is. We know it works. Slowly build things up. Yeah, I guess that would be the sort of best advice that I would have.
Awesome. And the final kind of advice someone would like, I guess, is from Megan, who asks, what is your best advice for someone to like pretty immediately or quickly reduce mental stress?
Wow. Yeah. Pretty quickly. It's a very individualized thing as well. I think all these questions, they're very individualized. There's a lot of nuance to them that you'd have to unpack with the person individually. But I'd say, like, for Megan yourself, like, first of all, it's understanding when that stress occurs. Like, what is the actual, like, the antecedent to it? What causes it? And then what are the things that you like to do that just, like, chill you out? Like, simply, like, well, what is it that you like to read a book? Great. Or do you hate books? I want to watch a YouTube video. YouTube videos are great. Is it music? We spoke about to evoke emotion, taking some moments better to just listen to some chilled music. I have so many playlists on my phone. My main ones I have is I've got a chill one and a hype one. The chill one goes on as soon as I want to de-stress and I just want to like zone out. So you've then got, I guess, techniques from a physiological point of view, which is, I guess, breathing exercises, which a lot of people do. I found for me a breathing rhythm that works really well for me is the 4-7-8. So breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 7 seconds, and then breathing out for 8 seconds. When I was in hospital on morphine and I had these crazy cramps in my stomach, that was actually the breathing that got me to actually calm down and reduce it. But yeah, breathing techniques are really useful in that way. Classic things, basic practice for breathing, nasal breathing, diaphragm breathing. Don't breathe your chest. So many people do costal breathing, which is breathing with your chest. Gives you back problems, but also it's a shallower breath, but then also sparks anxiety. When we like get panicky, we do this and like we breathe with our chest nice and quickly. That will cause stress. So a simple way to do that is breathe your diaphragm, pushing your stomach out. That's how we're meant to breathe. We're built to breathe like that. And then also a real quick one that I find like a cue is just slow my exhale. Slow your exhale down. That slows your heart rate down, reduces your stress as a result.
Amazing. All very good advice. And I hope that those 3 people are happy with the answers they got to their questions. But also, if you feel like you have questions that you might want to ask a future guest, then that is the opportunity. So if you're not already following on at @mindsets_podcast on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere, that is the place to get involved. So keep an eye on those stories for future guests and other opportunities to get involved.
On that, I just want to say, if anyone's got those questions I asked answered there's a lot of nuance there. So if you want to reach out to me and get like an actual bespoke answer and have a chat about it, then reach out.
That is Get Ahead Mindset. I mean, you've got your person as well, but if you're struggling to find those, they will be in the description of the podcast. So you'll find it there. No issue. Now, the next part is where we stop being reflective of other people. And I'm going to look for some internal reflection, essentially.
Okay.
So the 3 pieces of advice section is where I want you to remove me from the room.
Okay.
And it's going to be you and you. Now, whether that's you and 3 different versions of you or you in the same version, I'd like to know 3 quick pieces of advice that you'd give to a younger version of yourself.
Yeah. First of all, just chill out. Honestly, just chill out. Like, you don't need to do everything before, well, depending on what age I am, like before 10, before 20, before 30. Like, you don't need to do everything before that point. I think that's a massive one. Just chill the hell out. I think, yeah, got me thinking now. Leading on to that, I guess, yeah, I'm a very personal person, but what I would say to myself is like, I do like to hide away in my shell. This year, I've done something that's really helped, which was joining communities like run clubs. So I would have told myself a little bit earlier on, just get out there and start joining like fitness communities because they're so good, so good. That it helps me get out of that sort of introvert sort of hole that I get myself into, which I do enjoy, but I can get stuck in. So that would be another one. Get out there and enjoy those things. And then I guess maybe like, let me think of one that's quite targeted actually. Maybe to the kid when I was like 15, 14 years old and I was trying to decide, maybe even younger, trying to decide my options. This leads into the chill out piece of advice. Like, you can't control everything. Like, you just can't. I was planning out my options are going to choose what I do for my A levels. My A levels are going to choose what I do for my my undergraduate, which will choose like if I do a master's, that will choose my job. And I remember having nights of just breakdowns with my parents, like, what do I do? I had so much pressure on myself, and it's like, just gotta go be a bit more flexible with it. Like, you can't control everything. Control the controllables.
Great advice. And as a backup to that point, I had the exact same thoughts. I went and did aeronautical engineering, and now I currently make gym videos for a living. So like, don't overthink it, because you can spend a lot of time thinking you made the right decision, and then 10 years down the line, you tell your parents that you've quit that to go and make videos, and talk to cool people,
Yeah.
and try and make that a career. So all solid advice. And that brings us to the last section of the podcast, which is the previous guest question. So we had Ollie Russell, as I mentioned earlier on the podcast, was the previous guest, and pretty relative to the way he takes on training, a lot of what he's gone through in his life as well. He's got quite an interesting question, which is, if you were going into a pretty savage partner training session,
Yeah.
who would you pick? And they can be anyone from history, dead or alive. Who would you take with you, and why?
I mean, I feel like it's just obvious. Like, it's David Goggins.
I knew it.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Like, look, love him or hate him, I loved him for a period, fell out of love with him, and then now I've fallen back in love with him. Like, in terms of, like, as a psychologist, I think some of the things you need to take with a pinch of salt. But like, why would you not want to train with this guy? Like, as a psychologist, I want to understand what the hell is going on under that hood. Like, yeah, crazy.
Tell you another person that did come into my head though when I was thinking about this was Ronnie Coleman. Just having someone shine light would be incredible when I'm doing a sled push or something like that. I'd love that.
That's motivation right there.
Great answer. So, and I agree with the answer wholeheartedly. But that means I need to ask you for your question for the next guest, and it can be as silly or as deep as you like.
Yeah. Okay, let's make this one a bit more like a prompt that I think everyone should really use. So yeah, for the next guest, but also like I think is maybe something that you should think about, like listeners, viewers, think about yourself, and something that I go back to. It's like, what would you end up, like, what would you do if like literally money was no option? Like, no option at all. Like, didn't matter at all. Like, what would you actually be doing with your day to day? And that can be constructing it as, okay, on a Monday, I'd be doing this at 9 o'clock, and then go through your day, what I'd be doing at each point in an ideal world where nothing ever mattered. Because that, I think, for me has always been an anchor of what I just choose to do. And like, I've got quite an entrepreneurial spirit. So it's quite hard to keep focused when you're at the ups and downs. So yeah, that's something I would definitely ask.
I like that question. Would you care to answer that question?
Myself, should I give it time? I think what I realized recently is, again, going back to this whole perfectionist stuff, like have those standards I had for myself in sport translated over to business straight away. And financial gain, because surely that's a successive measurement, successful measurement of success, right? But the reality is, when I actually thought about why I'd want to be in like 10 years time, is, as I said to you before after the podcast, I want to be on a farm. I want to be working, doing something like I love, which for me is creating, talking about psychology, something along those lines. And I want to be doing it like with a family. Like, that seems like, for some, why not? Why is the family not like a big goal? That should be a big goal more than like your business or whatnot. I would like to have a successful business, but at the end of the day, like, as long as I'm doing something that I really enjoy and I love, and then in my day I can wake up at a good time, take the kids to school, that would be awesome. Work throughout the day remotely, like, I have to go anywhere. If I want to go somewhere, it's cool events, like in London, they have so many cool events, and then be able to pick the kids up and spend the evening with them and take them to, like, they're not doing swimming though. Screw that. Honestly, they're not doing swimming. They can do any other sport, just not swimming. They'll learn to swim, but they're not doing swimming. It's just too much. I'm not doing that effort. No.
Fair enough. I think with the amount of training as well, as a parent, dragging them around to that has got to be draining.
I've had enough of swimming pools. Yeah.
Amazing. I think that's a very healthy response, actually. So yeah, well, I mean, Robin, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I think you and I are probably going to talk plenty more, but these guys only tuned in for a podcast, not an ongoing discussion for the next 2 weeks. So we'll round it off. I do want to say a massive thank you to you. And where can people find you? Where can they get more advice and everything related to you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks so much. Honestly, absolutely amazing conversation. So yeah, if you want to find me at Get Ahead Mindset, getaheadmindset.com as well. But yeah, Get Ahead Mindset is our mental training app. I'll be there on my socials. I've got a personal account as well, but reach out through there and I'll get to you.
Amazing. As I said, I'll link everything. So if you're not sure, you can check it in the podcast description. But likewise, at mindsets_podcast is where you'll find everything related to this podcast. If you enjoyed today, please go and drop some love and make sure you're following Robin through all of those means and checking everything out. Likewise, if you don't mind dropping a like, a follow, even sharing this with some friends or some other athletes that you think it could benefit, you don't know how much that means. And I say that every time, but I genuinely mean it. I'm not ruined by these social media numbers. Like, one person following is crazy to me. And I love that. So I want to say thank you for that as well. Now, if you want to hear the answer to Robin's question to the next guest, that means you've got to tune in next week. And with that, I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode.